Forget about it.
We're so dumb.
I hate us.
Oh, man.
OMG. Noah, what show is this?
This is Noah Asked. My buddy, the Joey, is
Hey.
here with me.
Oh, yeah, that's me. It's my voice.
That is you.
I'm the Joey.
You're the Joey.
I am the Joey.
And today we're talking about success. It is a wonderful topic.
We know things about that, right?
I think we do. Before we've talked about goals.
Yeah.
And this time we're gonna touch on the goals, but then we're gonna come to the end results. We're gonna make it to the success.
Yeah. I mean, we touched on goals before in season 1.
Yes.
Which means it didn't matter. It didn't count. Because everybody loves season 2 so much more. And now,
guess.
yeah, and now I'm just like, you know what if we stopped calling it season 2 and just deleted season 1? We're just like renumber all of it. And we're just like, yeah, no. It really starts at season.
I feel like that would just be an endless cycle of like season 3, it's gotten so much better. And then I'm like, fuck season 2, which is what season 1, which
Cut ahead to 5 years. It's just like, season 1 of Noah Asked.
we've never had more than like 20 episodes on our channel at one time.
We get rid of all of them. We just pretend they
purge.
don't exist. We come back with new names. It's still called Noah Asked, but it's different people. So we're talking about success, which no one knows about except for when it comes to getting Joey to stay on task.
Right? Which no one knows about except for many, many facets of his life.
What? We're doing fine.
It's okay.
Cool. So what's the first topic? I don't have the outline in front of me as
okay.
usual.
So what I'm wondering is, do goals lead to success? I feel like that's something where we talked about goals, and goals might lead to something, but do they lead to success? And I want to know what you think on that.
So my personal opinion is that goals lead to success. That's because in my life, most of the things I set a goal towards, I'm able to achieve. So in my mind, it's like, yeah, I achieved that goal. That is success. In my opinion, goals work, but it appeared the more I looked into it that goals just kind of lead to you being disappointed. And the reason for that is, I don't know, there's just like a lot of studies that tell you the more you set specific goals, the more likely you are to actually feel like you're going to achieve them and like do well. But also the more likely you are to be kind of let down by the euphoria that comes with the goal, because you've been spending this time like building up to that kind of thing, that once you finally achieve it, it's not ever going to live up to the idea of being successful, you know?
For sure. So is it that goals could lead to achieving the task that you wanted to, but they don't lead to the result and the emotion that you thought they would?
Yeah, and one of the big problems with goals is that some of the goals we set them when we're young, which if you think about it, I set this goal when I was 18. I'm going to be this thing. And you work through, say, college and whatever to your career, and you finally achieve that thing. You've listened to this 18-year-old self your entire life, just kind of telling you to do these things and like set these expectations based on premises that no longer matter. So then you achieve the goal and you're like, wait a minute, why have I been working for this for so long?
Yeah, I always find it weird that they say like set up like 5-year, 10-year plans for stuff. And for some things like finances, like sure that works. But like emotional and like achievement-based stuff that's really like driven within yourself, you change so much, especially from like your teens to 20s, to where it's like in 5 years I might be a totally different person with completely different beliefs and ideals.
Yeah, for real. Like I think I've changed my goals about 15 times since I got to college. And it's funny because it actually has like flip-flop back and forth for me, because it was like before I went into the real world, I didn't think I was going to go to college. So my goal was just to make enough money to survive. And then I got the opportunity to go to college for something that didn't really pursue what I wanted to do, but I was like, you know what? I'll adjust my goals. I'll make this my goal instead. So I'm going to graduate from this college. So I went to that college for 2 years, and I was like, I actually went to that college for 1 year before I was like, you know what? This isn't it. So I changed my goal to like graphic design and broadcast. And then another year later, I'm like, you know what? I actually did want to do film like I originally thought. And so then I moved again. And it's just like life, I feel like, is constantly changing. So setting those long-term goals to me just isn't worth it. So right now, my personal philosophy is I don't really set a goal that's longer than a year ahead of me.
Yeah.
Like I have like that pie in the sky, like 5-year goal, but it's not super specific.
Definitely.
And I think I do that mostly so that I don't let myself down.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of scenarios where I don't know what I want to do, because there's a lot of points that I don't know exactly where I want to be in a few years, I just try to take steps that, in no matter which way I pivot, will be a beneficial step. And so like when I went to community college, I was like, well, I'm not going to take like degree specific classes because that could just ruin in any moment. So I might just try and do the gen eds and get those out of the way. And then once I get to a university, then I can switch over and start taking degree specific classes, because then I would have decided. Cut to 2 years later and I still hadn't decided, but now I have to take some steps.
But yeah, just a little bit of advice if anyone's listening who like hasn't gone to college yet. That's actually really smart though. Just going and starting with like a community college, going for gen eds. Looking back, I'm super stupid for not doing that. But I'm also impatient.
Yeah.
So I went into classes and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to immediately start doing what I want. It's funny because we both like kind of took two different paths to lead to the same like kind of point. It's just we screwed ourselves in different ways.
Yeah, definitely.
So like I went and I didn't take gen eds at first. And so I'm like dealing with that now, which is like such a pain in the butt. Like,
it's so much easier to do gen eds right after high school, where
gosh.
you're like, oh, I was already doing stuff I didn't want to do anyways. But after you start doing things you want to do,
Yeah.
then they just seem so pointless.
Yeah, and yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. It's like I took a geography class last year after it was my third year in college, and I was like, "What the heck?" And like, I also took a math class. It was the first math class I'd taken since I graduated, and so of course I was bad at it. Thank God it was an online class, so I'm a good kid and I did all of that off the top of my head and didn't Google the answers. I think in doing what I wanted to do immediately, I kind of figured out the direction I wanted to head and some of the goals I wanted to set, whereas I now have to deal with the repercussions of taking my gen eds. But the way you did it, you took your gen eds to set you up to do more exploring later, which I think will benefit you. Once you graduate, you'll be like more ready to enter your field. Whatever you choose it to be.
Definitely.
But whereas I'll be like, I might not be rusty, but I'll definitely be like exhausted. I feel like,
and I feel like jumping into college as both of us, like in our senior year, neither one of us took a whole lot of initiative to like really look at schools, really like vet out and do all that process.
Which surprises me because I look at you and your family and I think, oh yeah, Noah for sure like looked into college stuff. And then you were like, yeah, I'm going to take a year off. And I was like, what? Okay, that's weird. And then like, yeah, I wouldn't have gone to college if the college didn't come to me. Like,
yeah, like you specifically had a teacher who was like, you need to come here, right?
Yeah, like he was married to our choir professor, our choir teacher, and he was the music chairman. And he's like, yeah, I want you to come to my school. And I was like, you want me?
How nice.
That's so cool. And then I like went to a school that was barely bigger than our high school.
For sure.
Which isn't saying much because our high school
we had
was
a
tiny.
small high school.
But yeah, no, I think setting goals is important, but you should be loose on some of like your long-term goals. I think you should hold fast to your short-term goals, but then like the long-term ones, it's just you can't predict where you're going to be.
Because things don't like fall to you as much as like things can happen to you. You kind of have to be looking for them at the same time, and so you should really like work towards at least something, some small little tasks that get you to a bigger goal, even if you can't like force a bigger goal to happen upon you. Yeah,
and that kind of leads to happiness in the long run, anyways. And some of the stuff that I was reading. So I found this guy. He wrote this whole book. Oh, hey, no. Where do people find our sources? We'll just like bring that up since we're not going to like cite them very much anymore.
Yeah, we got a lovely Google Doc.
Yeah.
That has all of our websites that we researched off of.
Yeah, it's going to be linked down in the description below. So if we're talking about something and you're like, I don't know about that, you guys can click on this link and you can see all of our sources because we believe being credible is important. Because we're an edutainment, baby.
Yeah.
So this guy, great book, had a lot of really interesting points. He talked about how we should fall in love with the systems in place rather than the goals themselves. Because going for a goal can set you up for exactly what we talked about, where it's like you build it up and you think you should be happy because you achieve it, but now what? He was saying that goals just to quote, offer momentary success. So if you win, then you only win for the moment. And the example he kind of gave was like, you have a dirty room, right? So you're going to clean up that room, but that's only a temporary win because if you keep living the same way you are, you're going to end up with a dirty room again.
I feel that way a lot with our dishes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I do the dishes and I was like, wait, didn't I do these yesterday?
Yeah.
Our sink is full again?
Oh, it's so hard because we don't have any counter space, man.
It really is.
We chose the wrong apartment.
No.
But yeah, so he's saying if you change how you deal with these things and clean up what you're putting in, what you get out then automatically fixes itself. So if you change your habits to just clean up as you go rather than let all of the dirty dishes pile up, then you're not going to have dirty dishes if you do them as you go. So like I thought that was like a really interesting way to look at it. It's like rather than building up this success. It's almost like celebrating the small things on the way, just being like, oh yeah, I did this now. And so now I get to yield the result all the time of being happy and successful. And I think that can be applied to like a lot of things, like your job. If you have like the goal of wanting to make 100K a year or 6 figures or whatever, you're probably going to be less happy once you achieve it if all you've been doing is eating crap until you achieve this thing and building it up, and then you get it, and sure, you're monetarily successful, but now are you doing a job that you hate just to achieve this goal?
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot, where a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about success were about these like big people who made it big in their field and were like monetarily successful, socially successful, but perhaps weren't happy. What I was realizing is people set these goals, and then once they attain the goals, then they'll switch their lifestyle, is like the idea. They're going to get a bunch of money, and then they'll start spending time with family. But like once you start getting enough money, then you have to worry about like maintaining the money, and you have a job that takes more hours. So then that cuts into your time and things like that. And so people expect their like to be a big shift once they attain the goal, but it never really happens that way.
Yeah.
And so you need to just live the way you want to live, and then try to get the goal kind of around the way you live.
Yeah, and I think that's like a really good point. I actually have something written here. They gave an example in this guy's book. He talks about runners. So like runners, when they do it correctly, they don't let the race be the finish line. So like you're training for your marathon, right? And you're training for months and months and months, and then you finally get there and you're like, yes, I did it. I didn't break down. I didn't cry. I didn't like have to pee myself on the run, which I don't know how common that is, but I like that's what I've heard is like distance runners are just like, oh, well, I gotta pee. Well, I'm just gonna pee while running. I'm like, that's weird.
That sounds
but
awful.
anyways,
Have you ever had to pee while running? While mobile?
Oh, yeah.
Even? Okay.
yeah, no, it usually motivates me to run faster. Like when I've been at the gym before, and it happens almost every time that as soon as I finish my first lap, I like have to pee. And I don't know what it is, but I just tell myself either A, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Or B, okay, but you can only pee after you finish a mile and a half or whatever.
That's like torturing yourself. Why do you do this?
Because I don't want to stop, because I've already got momentum, and so I have to stop momentum to go again. But speaking of momentum, so runners keep that momentum going by keeping on running after the marathon. So like you keep training even if you're maybe not training for something, because otherwise what was the point of doing it at all?
Right.
You know, so you won, but only for a moment, because now you're gonna like gain that weight back again.
We had a friend who's ran a half marathon. Both my parents have ran a half marathon. And basically all of them said like, yeah, I did it. I don't think I want to do another one, or I don't want to do a full marathon. And
I don't get that.
yeah, I'm like, well, if you put in all this work, I know like my parents, like their knees started to hurt. They're a little older. It's like,
Nah, they're just
you just
weak.
like attained your goal. Then like, what was the point? What did you get from it? I guess the amount of time, the experiences that you got, or what you have now.
I mean, I guess, but you know, you sit in the room with the guy who also did a race. So, you know, and I'm really like, I'm kind of bummed because there's it's coming up in, I think it's not this weekend, but next weekend is another Tough Mudder. And I was like really looking forward to going to it, and I'm not going to be able to just because I didn't train very much, first of all. So I really shouldn't, but I still want to go and try. But also I don't have the funds to go. It's in Colorado, so I'm not gonna go there. Yeah, I mean, that's always interesting to me, the mindset of the race is the finish line, and you're just never gonna do anything else again. And why? You know, like you've worked so hard to reach this point, then you're done. And I feel like that ultimately in life, maybe not specifically in races or whatever, some people like your parents decide, oh, for one reason or another, they had their cake, their sweet whatever. They're like, oh, cool, we're going to relax now because now we can say we've done that. I think when it comes to setting goals, you should aim further, like past that, you know, if you want to maximize your happiness per se.
Definitely. And you should root it in the process. You should enjoy the running, not just like enjoy hoping that you'll finish, because it ends up being a lot less emotionally impactful than it would be.
Yeah, that's why I always say you should smile while you're running. People go in and they're like, oh man, I hate running. It's like, well, yeah, you're gonna hate running if you have that attitude. Same with anything in life. If you're like working at a fast food restaurant, you're like, man, I hate this job. You're gonna hate that job. I mean, the job might suck, but it'll suck a lot less if you try and find the little things that you enjoy about it. Like, you know, how you spit in that lady's food when she was mean to you. Didn't that just feel wonderful?
Right.
But, you know, then you don't have a job anymore, and that leads to sadness, and you probably don't want that, but whatever.
Success is rooted in the goals that we had set to begin with. You know, you can't really attain success unless you know what you're going to try to attain. And there's a couple different types of goals. Kind of want to talk about those. There's the big, broad types of goals, which there's two categories that can basically encompass anything. and that's intrinsic versus extrinsic goals. Do you know the difference in those?
No, those are big words.
Big words.
I have small boy brain.
It's very simple because intrinsic is stuff that is rooted inside of you. A lot of intrinsic goals are things that you do because they make you happy. It might be something like, I'm going to try and save the world. I'm going to try and help people. I'm going to try and be like healthier so I can like live longer and feel better about myself. Whereas extrinsic goals are usually like object oriented, achievement oriented, to where it's like, oh, I want to be like financially successful. I want to get a promotion. I want to be respected by the people around me and things like that. And so I feel like those two different types of goals can lead to two very different paths, either to success or failure. And so I didn't know what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, I think it changes from person to person for sure too, because I feel very intrinsically motivated, but not without the idea of having extrinsic final outcomes, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I love the day-to-day of editing videos, of shooting videos, of making podcasts and writing this and doing all of these and hanging out with my best friend and getting people to watch our stuff. I guess that getting people to watch our stuff would be extrinsic.
Yeah, it would be.
But like the day-to-day of doing this and taking pride in this is, I feel like, a lot of what motivates me beyond all of what getting 1,000 likes could do, you know?
But ultimately, if you don't put it anywhere, would you have done it?
I think,
Because if you don't have any extrinsic motivation, is it worth it?
I think it's normal to have that mix.
And I feel like most intrinsic goals have an extrinsic goal at the end. And they're just like innately tied. The things you want to do on the inside will often lead to some sort of result.
On the outside.
And I feel like sometimes people can forget what the intrinsic goal was, because intrinsic goals can have the same extrinsic result. And so even though the same outcome happens, you might have shifted your morals or the path that you were going to take it, and it ends up not making you as happy in the long run, because you ended up having to sacrifice stuff for a goal that you weren't necessarily heading for in the beginning, because before it was rooted in the intrinsic goal. By the end, you were just aiming for that extrinsic result.
Yeah, it's kind of like that saying of like cheaters never win, right?
Yeah.
Because you can achieve your goal. Say you embezzled and you got your 6-figure salary, right? But now you're going to jail for fraud. So you still, like, in the end, like, you achieved your goal and maybe you felt that like success, but then you could still end up losing in the long run anyways. And that can be applied to a lot of things, I think. Just a lot of different scenarios. It doesn't have to be specifically like, oh yeah, you go to jail, but it could be like, oh, the guilt of never having a family, or the guilt of killing that family to get you whatever, or, you know, all those kind of things. And so I think having that mix is just kind of the key. Like,
and I feel like
balance.
if you root your happiness in something that's extrinsic, then theoretically that could be taken away at any moment, and then you're left with nothing. But if you had like built this thing on roots that are intrinsic values and like things that you believe in, hard work and stuff like that, then even if you lose what you had, you have the experiences, you have like the grit gained and things like that, that you can't be taken away.
You can't take the money with you when you're gone. All you have is like the memories and whatever in the end, and that those don't like go with you. I mean, depending on your belief, they could go with you, but I think that's maybe more of a noble way to live life, if nothing else. I would rather have those experiences and everything than all of the, well, maybe not all the money in the world, but like, you know, you need money to have these experiences. Then the downside, like, it leads into this kind of downward spiral where you're like, oh man, I would love to just have a bunch of experiences rather than like have like money and financial success. I'd rather have all of this. But it's like, you need a little bit of financial success to have like these memories, right? Like, have some of them to go to Cabo or go to like, you know, backpacking in Asia. I think you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, they're all kind of tied, and just money is a big part of this world. So
I keep coming back to it. I think it's all about that balance, man. You just gotta have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Mr. Miyagi said it best: too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So don't work too hard, even if you love your work.
Definitely. So there are different kinds of motivation. And I just kind of wanted to go through a little list that I like found. And I was just curious if like they work for you, see the motivation behind it, see why it would work for some people, if not you.
Okay.
So the first ones I have are these intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. They kind of apply to all the rest of them. And the next one would be achievement motivation.
Okay.
So that would be motivation based on a goal that would be happening in the future. Like you said earlier with like making videos, the achievement one is posting the videos and people watching it or getting so many likes or something like that.
Like, say, the result from the process. I mean, of course, that's going to be a motivator, right? Like, you do something and then you get something in return. I think that's usually how our capitalist world has led us to believe.
Do you think it's a fulfilling motivator? Do you think?
I think it could be for a little while. I think there's like you rub that like pleasure center in your brain with that kind of thing enough that it's eventually just going to run out and you're not going to feel the same. Like we see it all the time with people who are social media influencers who are just out there trying to get likes on Instagram or just out there trying to get hits on YouTube and trying to go viral constantly because they hit it once and they hit it so hard that there's no way they can ever live up to it again. And so they have lost their kind of love for the process and they're just living for that
and even
outcome.
if you could get it again, it's not the same and might not have even been worth it. Even if it was different, it's just a totally different experience.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It's just that 7 seconds of fame and you're just like, and then it's gone. It's gone forever.
So I was listening to a podcast earlier where Tom Lennon was the guest and he had written a book and it became the #2 bestseller on New York Times. And he was like, you know what? I'm so glad it was #2 bestseller because if it's #1, I would just go insane. There'd be 7 seconds of happiness and then I would just pop. What do I do next? I'm the #1 bestseller. I need to hire an editing team. I need to do this and this and this.
You're just constantly just under stress. I feel like we hear that about writers all the time. One of the big ones I've heard is Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, the creators of Rick and Morty, for those of you who don't know. Dan Harmon specifically went out on saying basically that all of the last 3 seasons of Rick and Morty have been so good and they've gotten so much positive feedback. He was scared because it's coming out this fall, but he was so scared to even start writing season 4 because as long as he didn't start writing, he was still an amazing writer. As long as he didn't like write anything else, he was still just on top. And so
as long as he didn't shoot a shot, he didn't miss, kind of thing.
Precisely. That's really scary. Like it's really scary for a lot of things. And we experienced our own like minor version of this right before recording this, like, oh wow, people have loved season 2. Well, we can't mess up now.
Right, yeah. We batch recorded the first ones. We took a little break and now we're not in the same groove that we were in.
Yeah, but I think having those achievement-related goals, while they can be good in the short term, often probably lead to like long-term exponential drop-off.
Definitely. When we talk about success, we assume that means you made it to where you needed to be. But sometimes success is rooted in failure. Is failure necessary for success?
Oh, absolutely. Like I think that there's no way you can truly say you're successful without failing 1,000 times because 1, it makes you more relatable and that's a dope story, but 2, you have to, like, no one is immediately good at everything, right? I am confident enough to say that I am good at video editing and I am good at producing content. I didn't always make good content. Like I was that kid 13 years old, making Minecraft YouTube videos, talking on the my very first Minecraft video, which is still out there, by the way. I have decided to not make that account private in case anybody wants to like try and go back, I guess. My very first video is, I think it's like 15 minutes long. At least 5 to like 7 minutes of it are on the Minecraft home screen, just me talking. I guess even back then I knew I was just going to be, talking bullshit into a microphone.
It never mattered what was on the screen. It was just me talking.
It's always, I'm just in love with my voice. That's actually not true. I have such a hard time editing sometimes. Wow, I don't know if I hate what I said or if I hate that it's me that said it.
There's another type of motivation called incentive motivation. That is the motivation where you are motivated through the acts of what you're doing. It is the process that you love. Usually you do something merely for like the skills kind of gained as opposed to the achievement at the end. And I feel like that is a much better form of motivation. It's rooted in something it can't like ever be taken away from you. It just like is almost like guaranteed to lead to success because if you're happy what you're doing, then it doesn't matter what the end result is.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty much the same as the thing earlier where it's like if you fix your inputs and clean up your inputs, your outputs automatically come back. Another analogy given there was like a coach. So if you're the coach of a basketball team and your goal, say your achievement related motivation is the championships, but the incentive and system to get there is training your team better and like getting better assistant coaches and focusing on recruitment. If you clean up those like systems and your team, then you're automatically like winning anyways, even if you guys don't get to the championships, but you have a better chance of perhaps getting to the championships because you have spent less time just staring at a scoreboard and more time paying attention to your team and understanding what they need.
Look at you with your sports references.
I know. I read it from someone else, so don't give me too much credit. But
the next one I have is fear motivation. How do you think that works?
Sorry, you scared me.
I'm sorry. There's the fear of fear. There's nothing to fear but fear itself.
So it sounds like that's motivation that is derived from like a fear of failure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like it, but at the same time, I think it works for a lot of people. I feel fear motivation most when I'm on stage, when I'm in front of a live audience, because I don't know, like I feel like, oh, I can't fail, because if I do fail and mess up, then I'm probably just gonna like go and cry, and I don't do that very often, so I'd rather not. In my opinion, it's not the greatest. I don't really like negative motivators all that much, but I could see how it could be extremely
it could be
powerful.
effective. It just might not be like the healthiest or
mentally.
Definitely. Yeah, like the example they gave was buying a dress that's like too small for you and like needing it for an event. So then you have to lose the weight to be able to wear it. And if you can't in time, then
I don't know if I like that analogy.
Yeah,
because I feel like
it's a common one. I hear of like girls doing that all the time. Like, oh, I'll just get a half size down, it'll be fine. And
I feel like that analogy leads to bulimia though, and I don't want to condone that. No. Or like maybe not even bulimia, but like, you know, some other eating disorder. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's a negative motivator, but it's trying to lead to a positive result of losing weight, and it's also achievement based because then you get to look good in that new dress.
That's okay. So here's a fun one. I read a study that was actually studying this exact thing. That was studying women's weight loss. Found that women who had just the goal, like the really solid goal in mind of I'm going to lose weight, did lose it, as long as like they were very specific with like, oh, I want to lose 15 pounds, I want to lose 20 pounds, something like that. They would often achieve it, but after they achieved that goal, most of the time, I think it was like 40% of them actually bounced back to like gaining the weight back immediately.
So yeah, if you just had a goal in mind, you basically reached your goal and then just like regressed.
But people who started to change their diets in ways that helped them actually enjoy doing their diet and actually stuck to their diet, lost weight and more, and kept it off because they learned to love the change in diet, and then they were happier with themselves because one, they're healthier, two, they're fitting in clothes that they wanted to fit in before. So, and I think there's just like an inherent happiness in being healthy in general. But
definitely, the reality show The Biggest Loser was like a weight loss TV show.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We would watch that sometimes, and some of the winners that would lose like over 200 pounds to become the winner ended up like regressing and like being heavier than they'd ever been before and things like that. And it's like, wow, you got so fit, you were the healthiest you've ever been in your life, or like in 30 years or something like that. Apparently it was just so easy just to fall back into old habits and like not maintain it, and you were content, I guess.
Yeah, their goals didn't work for them because they didn't like continue running after the finish line.
Yeah, it was very achievement based. It was like, oh, I'm gonna get there and then I'll be happy and then it'll just stay off. But it's more of a lifestyle, more of a process kind of thing.
Yeah, fall in love with those systems. All right, what's up next? I'm ready.
What's up next? We got power motivation.
Ooh, power, the control of others' lives and those around us?
Yeah.
Huh.
That sounded very dark and scary, like, oh, yes, the one that makes me rule over the plebeians.
I mean, is that incorrect?
No, it's right. You just said it so casually that I'm a little terrified of you now.
Oh,
nah. You know power motivation, the one where I dominate the world.
Yeah.
You know the one where I control your every move and thought?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
I mean, I would be motivated by power, except for the fact that I'm stupid. So, like, I'm just smart enough to understand that I will never be able to control other people's lives. I think the closest I come to this is I would like to direct. And that comes with a lot of responsibility in dealing with other people and telling them what to do and controlling them in that way. But I think for me, that almost isn't connected, because I want to direct for the reason of creating art that is expressed through all of the people involved and like creating something greater than any one of us could do. Just for people out there who know I want to direct, and when I say, no, I'm not power driven at all, they'd be like, wait a minute.
You want to be in charge.
Yeah, he wants to be in charge of everyone. It's like, no, that's not the motivation. The motivation is the art, okay? You wouldn't get it because you're not cool. I'm in school for it because I am cool, and I drool. I don't drool. It's not true. Don't drool, kids.
It's not safe. It's a nicotine addiction.
It is. It's bad. It's a nicotine addiction. You can overdose on nicotine. People don't tell you that. You get nicotine sickness.
It was never meant to help people get off cigarettes. It was only meant to hook new children.
Yeah. This podcast is brought to you by the Attorney General. And
yeah, it is the anti-smoking company. Yeah.
But yeah, power. I don't really like this one. I know a few people who are definitely power motivated, and those are people who I'm generally not friends with.
Yeah, but I think it can be an effective motivator. You usually see it a lot with like movie villains and stuff where it's like trampled on my whole life and things like that. But when you're in a mentality where you've always been kind of on the bottom and now like the goal of your life is to be on top, then like power motivation is an effective one. And so
is that then still incentive motivation as well? Sorry, no, I guess I was meaning achievement, not incentive.
Oh, achievement motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could be. Achievement motivation seems to like kind of trickle its way into a lot of things because, you know, everything has to have a result.
Yeah.
But
Mostly physical. Yeah.
Yeah, I think power specifically is like its own thing and it's not a tangible thing. So it's not necessarily an achievement, but like a state of being.
Fun fact though, like looking and like researching all of these levels of like motivation and different types, it's given me so much to think about when it comes to like writing a bad guy and writing like good guys and whatever, and stories and scripts and D&D campaigns. All of these are very easily just applied to whatever, and you just have to choose the ones that usually kind of create bad guys to make your bad guy.
Yeah, for like a bad guy, it'd usually be like achievement, fear, or power, probably.
What's up next up for power, Noah?
My next one is social motivation.
Social.
Yeah, so that's like your family and your friends around you who like motivate you to do better, or just seeing other people within your society and like wanting to achieve more than what you have currently.
I think that's an okay one. Although I watched this like short animatic where they talked about this specific thing. Like they didn't say it explicitly. In the end, that's kind of what it was. And it was a story about a boy who grew up kind of poor, and then his family told him that he should go to college because everyone he knew was going to college. And he's like, yeah, I didn't have a second thought about it. So he went to college and he got his degree and he became a doctor because that's exactly what his parents said he should do if he was smart and good enough. And if he didn't hate it, then he should do it. So he did it. He became a doctor and he felt successful, and he got a wife because that's exactly what, you know, everyone around him was doing. He thought like, oh yeah, I'm gonna marry this girl because I think she's pretty and I enjoy her and my career is happy. But then flash forward like 30 years and he's now like in his 50s, 40s or whatever. So flash forward and he feels like he's going through routine, and his parents have passed away, and now the people that motivated him to do this thing are gone, and he has no reason to be motivated to do this thing anymore because everyone who cared about it is no longer a part of his life.
Yeah, now he's stuck with himself, who doesn't necessarily approve of the decisions that he made.
And that's what we call a midlife crisis.
Whoa.
But
it's like there's a term for that. Whoa.
Wow, crazy. In that sense, I feel like there are parts of it that are bad. Like choosing your entire life career and everything based around this is probably bad. Now, I think there are good things about it, like being motivated to help your community, being motivated to do like the right thing and maybe like donate to local charities and donate your time or volunteer at a soup kitchen or something. Like I think those are great motivators. You do them because they help those around you. I think doing things because that's what you feel other people would do or would want to do or should want to do is probably not the greatest for long-term happiness.
Another dangerous effect of this motivator is something that I feel like you've experienced a lot and I've experienced a lot. A lot of young people have, is looking at people in your career field who have succeeded at a very young age.
Oh God.
And striving to want to be them because they would be like the pinnacle, the peak of this like social motivation. And you see them and you're like, well, they've already achieved everything they wanted to do, and I'm 3 years older than them when they did it.
Yeah, I do that stuff with people who even like aren't in my field. They're just like generally in the field. Like I did that with Bo Burnham. I did it with Aziz Ansari before he had his whole thing. And like, yeah, I was just like looking at him like, wow. Aziz Ansari was 18 when he had his first comedy album. And it was like really good stuff. And then Bo Burnham was in high school when he wrote a lot of his early songs that like he put out on YouTube. And I was like, wow, look at me. Not knowing what my career is doing, not really trying a whole lot new. I was like, wow, I really don't feel like I'm doing all that great. So, yeah, that's pretty detrimental to your health.
So social motivation, I feel like, can be a powerful one and can help motivate people to do good things and like step up their game a little bit, especially with like rivals and things like that, where there's one person just a little better than you, so you want to be a little better than them. And that can really like make people increase their abilities in certain areas. But I feel like if that's your only motivator, and especially if it's an unattainable goal, then it can really lead to like unfulfillment and things like that.
Yeah, no, and I think the rivals thing is a really good point too. I actually feel like a lot of the reason I came to KU was looking for a rival because I've never had anyone who was even close to like what I did with video and stuff. And that sounds super cocky. That's just because I grew up in a small town. And
in a Midwestern town, nonetheless, where it's a lot of agriculture and things like that. So film is not a priority in any sense of the word.
Yeah, and it's like I went to that small small town. Then I went to a small like college, and I was like, well, I really kind of want to do this video thing. And then I started utilizing the resources around me and talked to the professor of communications at that school and put together with just whatever ragtag stuff I could. I think I literally used like what are they called? Like their can lights, like for, I always think of them for chickens because that's what we would use them for.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could put like a heating bulb in them, and that's what you can use it for. But yeah, I used a bunch of those to light this project that I just did in an afternoon, and I showed it to him, and he's like, this is better than anything my seniors showed me. Immediately I was like, yeah, if I pursue film, I'm not going here.
Yeah, I don't want that to be like what I strive for, because then I'll lower my own expectations and things
Exactly. I don't want to become dull ever. And so here I am going to a school with a lot of people who are better than me, just so I can try and learn from them and be like, how did they do that? And it's a good time. But yeah, no, I think that having that be your only goal is probably no bueno, but also having rivals is good. Also only when you and your rival can have it as like kind of a friendly competition. So like say you have your arch enemy, right? And you're going up against them and you're training every day to get better than they are. And maybe they're even like naturally talented. And so they don't even have to try. And you're working your butt off and you go in one day and you did it. You're better than them. You cross that finish line. Wow, it feels great. But now they're not trying anymore because you've beaten them, and they're like, oh, well, I've never had to try before, so I'm not going to. They're not.
You started a competition that they were not a part of.
Yeah.
And so now that you've beaten them, they're not growing as well. And so you attained a useless goal, kind of.
Yeah, and so I think those are often best when there's like a little bit of back and forth, and it can be a friendly rivalry where you kind of learn from each other, not only like fight each other. So
yeah,
just a fun little note on that. It's just my opinion. I didn't read anything on it, but it's what I've derived from all of the information you're throwing out at me.
The big bad stuff. Yeah, I remember having some friends in high school who one of them was a big rival with the other, and the other one was just naturally like more talented and like fit roles better in these scenarios. And so he felt that they were rivals. Eventually, one of them just like kept like growing taller, and being in high school, like that fits you into different roles, older, more mature roles. And so once they separate, they finally like gained a mutual respect for each other, and then they like helped each other grow as like team. And so that was really interesting to show like where the competition actually hindered them, because like one kind of hated the other and the other one wasn't even like noticing him. But then once they got to like start working together and be like co-stars, then they like really helped them grow.
Yeah, it's like that trope where it's like you befriend like the evil guy and you guys work together to become even stronger than you ever were apart. And it's like a real kind of reminds me of Megamind, because he's like, I'm the bad guy, but then he has to become the good guy.
It's a good movie. It's A1. It's on Netflix. Watch it now.
Like, I feel like it is a little bit underrated. We should have a whole Noah ass about Megamind. So what's next? Is there another boy on the list?
These ones aren't quite as direct motivators, but they are motivators. And so the next one is called expectant theory of motivation. This is the idea that having a goal makes you want to attain it more. Just the idea of like, oh, this could be me. And picturing yourself in a scenario where you are better than what you currently are makes you want to achieve that goal.
Yeah, so just the idea of becoming a better person or better at what you do.
Or like attaining your goal or getting whatever you need to get.
So does that require you to never actually achieve the goal?
Not necessarily. Kind of like a placebo effect of like thinking it's going to happen. Kind of like helps make it happen.
Okay.
Helps like push you towards it.
Yeah. No, I could get behind that. Yeah, because I do that a lot in my stuff. Like just I'll sit back and get distracted kind of daydreaming about what could happen if I continue down this path. And then I remember, oh yeah, I'm still making a donut in Blender. But yeah, no, like I definitely see that because I feel very motivated by the idea of becoming better at this and getting good.
And then my last one here is called the arousal theory of motivation. And yeah, the word threw me off. I was like, wait, are you going to be like more motivated when you're like in heat? I don't know.
You're in heat. I was gonna say whenever you're around Stacy, the girl you like, but yeah, in heat is another way to say that for sure. No, you're not gonna say we can cut this out. Okay, arousal. Tell me about it.
So arousal theory of motivation is the idea that when your brain reaches like a certain point of activity, you become like more likely to reach your goals. The idea is that like if you're not like moving around, not being active at all, then you're not going to attain your goals because your brain just doesn't like want to like jump up and do something that feels like is work. But at the same time, if your brain is like too aroused, it's working too hard, then it's going to be exhausted and it's not going to want to like try and work towards goals. In the arousal theory of motivation, if your brain is like aroused to this very specific point of activity, then you'll be most likely to succeed at your goals.
I think that makes so like working enough but not too hard. I can see that.
Helps put you on track for possibly other things, not just like the work you are having at hand.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, because if you do too much, then you would hit burnout a lot faster. But if you don't do anything, then the thought of even trying becomes scary, and the thought of doing anything becomes less desirable. And so just like being in between those two and working a healthy amount towards a goal could lead to you being more likely to achieve it. Is that
Yeah.
like, I'm trying to put it in like layman's terms in ways that like my big dumb head can understand.
For sure. It is kind of a weird thing because I think it's just a theory and it's just talking about it. But yeah, for the most part, it's if you're at like a certain set of alertness and a certain set of like tiredness, then you can be functional enough to do other activities, not just like the thing that made you alert or active.
Yeah, and this is just a theory, right? So like they don't have any like actual specifics of like, oh, you should be at like 14% arousal at all times or whatever.
I did not see anything on that.
Okay. But okay, yeah, I could see that working in a lot of ways.
If you don't have momentum, it's hard to get started. But if you've been like working to burn out, then it's hard to like push even further.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It just
like
seems reasonable.
Like a distributing of like energy kind of thing.
A lot of this, it's kind of about like attaining the goals and stuff. And sometimes I worry about like the goals when you reach them just not being fulfilling. And we've kind of touched on it a little bit that you just get there and it's not enough. And so I was kind of wondering, why isn't it enough? One big term I came across was the arrival fallacy.
Okay.
That was a pretty common term. And the idea is that you build things up so much in your mind that it is impossible to actually attain them in real life. And I know I've experienced this with a lot of things, especially with like events and like things like proms and things like that. They are built up in my mind to be such as like this big event where everything is going to be happy and good, but then it's just another day, really. And like you make it happy and good, and sometimes it's a little better than like your everyday stuff, but it's just not this extravagant thing that like makes you happy. It's like you still kind of have to work towards it and things like that. Like a wedding, like you just kind of expect it to be like grand and beautiful, but if you're not like there with the people that you want to be around, then it's just going to be kind of
It's just another day.
Yeah,
no, and I feel like I actually kind of work against this sometimes. So it could be a little bit different. Just call me out if this doesn't fit. But I used to do this thing when I was a kid. Whenever I was trying something new and it would make me super anxious, I would think about it and have this like it built up on this pedestal. But then I would like take a deep breath and realize that it is just going to be another day and everything's going to be fine. And so that would help me as a kid overcome the anxiety of trying new things. So does that kind of like...
Yeah, that's you like kind of counteracting it, kind of like recalibrating your expectations, not to be bamboozled by the actual outcome.
Do you think that's a better way to go about things? Do you think more people should think like that? Or
yeah, and I think it can help you be fulfilled in your like when you actually achieve something.
Yeah.
But I could also see where it could dissuade you from actually trying to achieve it. Because like we said before, like imagining something and like having this expectation can like really help motivate you to get somewhere.
Yeah, to try the new things rather than... Okay, I guess I could see that. Because when I was a kid, I was also being forced to do these things I didn't like. Whereas if I were to do it now and I was like, oh, I don't really like that, well, I guess I won't.
Yeah.
That's
so
fair.
they're like two sides of the same coin. It's like one might help you be more fulfilled when you end up doing it, but the other might make you more likely to do it. I also read about this thing called the hedonic adaptation / hedonic treadmill.
Okay.
I feel like you did a little research on that.
I did.
Tell us about that.
So I found this really interesting research paper, which is something I feel like I never say because I'm not a big studies person. I've always been more of like, oh, I will take the applied knowledge of like these things and just do it rather than, applied knowledge of these things. Well, let me just read more into what other people have read
you're
about
more
them.
of like I want to watch a video or do a practice instead of like read an article kind of
Yeah. I mean, and part of that is my inability to read, but also, I'm just very much a visual learner. I was very intrigued by this article, and it's linked there. I highly suggest you read it. Anyways, they had this really interesting study that was trying to determine whether or not people have a set amount of happiness. Now, perhaps we should start with like the definition of hedonic treadmill. So basically, it says it is a theory that your body has a kind of resting point of happiness. Anything that you do can either take from that or add to it, but you will always come back to that resting point no matter what you do. It's the same reason that people who have an extreme life-altering disability or enhancement, like say losing the ability to use your legs or gaining $10 million from the lottery eventually settle back into the same amount of happiness they had pre-life changing whatever. So does that sound kind of right?
That sounds about right.
The paper I read was describing how it's possible that this is related to genetics, because everyone's always chasing, oh well, I want to be happier, oh well, I want to succeed more, and success will maybe give me more happiness. And what this paper says is essentially, nah. What they found was that most of what you do, your intentional activity, only equates to about 40% of your happiness level, like where you're resting, but the rest of it, 50% of it, is genetics.
That's not the rest.
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay.
I guess I should rephrase that. But the rest of it is split into two things.
Okay.
Genetics, which makes up 50% of it. There, you can cut right there, so it sounds seamless. People who are listening, that was a seamless thing. You're all like, whoa, seamless. I'm like, exactly. but yeah, so 50% of it is genetics, which means you have no control over that part of the levels of it. So it's linked to your genes. And then the next 10%, which makes it to 100 if my math adds up correctly, comes from life experience. So how you're raised, where you come from, the
environment that you were raised in kind of gives
your
that
environment
last 10%.
is probably a good way to think about it. So that means that roughly 60% of it is more or less out of your control and just has to do with your genetic makeup and the things that are around you. And the rest of it is what you choose to do. And so whether you choose to run every day, whether you choose to eat healthy, whether you choose to think about happier things in life, whether you choose to, all of those kind of things. So most of it is just kind of out of your control, and you're always just going to return to this level regardless.
You have this level that's kind of determined by a lot of your genetics. 40% is quite a bit, though.
Yeah.
It seems like you could alter. It does feel a little daunting when you say 60% is kind of out of your control. But 40%, you can really like go up a couple letter grades in that.
Yeah, you could sway it. I don't mean it to sound so. I realize now looking back, it did sound a little bit more like
oh, you're screwed. It's all about the world you're in.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'm saying you're screwed about is your level. Like really, once you're set, I think she gave an age. I don't want to give one, but it's after adolescence and you graduate high school. You reach this set it just kind of sits there for most of your life. Your experiences shape what level you're going to be set at, like when you're young.
Yeah, if you want to visualize it, the idea is if something amazing happened, if you won the lottery, your happiness is a line until you hit the lottery. It spikes way up. And then it just like slowly curves down back to where that line would have been. And then the same thing if something terrible happens, if a parent dies, then it spikes way down and then it'll just like slowly work its way back up.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do a lot with adaptive preferences.
Okay.
Where people inherently kind of mold to the environment they're given. And so when something bad happens, we just create new patterns to like adapt to them. Or if something good happens, we just create new patterns to expect the things that are coming our way. Considering we like set our happiness level at age 20 to 25, we're always going to adapt to make it so that's where we sit.
That makes sense. It's part of our like human nature and just overcoming our surroundings and just becoming overall just better than everything around us.
Yeah, it sounds just like a safety protocol. It's like, like sure you can't be like super happy all the time, but we're also preventing you from getting super depressed also. We're just going to kind of keep you at your middle.
Your body is like having just this talk with itself. It's like, listen, you can't be happy all the time because then there's no middle point. If there's no middle point, then you can go from happy straight to sad. We don't want that. That's called being bipolar. That's not bad. It's not a good thing. But I think that's a good safety protocol. I did find something, however, that at first sounds really, really happy, like a really good thing. But then I read it and it was much less of a good thing. So basically what it says is happiness can and does change over time. This is from that same study or that same paper that talks about a study with veterans who had their happiness kind of tracked, their treadmill area studied for about 22 years. It found that their happiness really kind of grew and crested at about age 65. The problem is that it plateaued there for a while and then hit a pretty steep decline at about 75, where then I believe the study ended, but it was on a very, very steep downward curve. And there was a correlation between age and well-being in another study that was done with Village, people between the ages of 14 and 65. And 24% of people from that study reported that in the course of that 23 years, they had declined in happiness. So what we're kind of gathering is that over time, your happiness is probably going to go down a little bit, but it looks like there's a correlation between it and like much later in our years when our body is starting to degrade a lot of things, not just our mental state.
Yeah, and I feel like with the age thing that our dipping level of happiness has to do a lot with our mind not being able to adapt as fast as our body is like decaying. So we have our adaptive preferences that are trying to bring us back to our level, but at a certain point it's just like harder on your body to maintain a certain level of happiness. And so possibly maybe that's why the level dips so low at older ages.
Yeah, and like there's all in all, there's really not a whole lot of studies on this kind of stuff. So, correlation does not mean causation. So it could just be, something that like, oh yeah, as life goes on, there's certain environmental changes you can't really account for. So sometimes things get harder, like whether you lose a job and you're jobless for 10 years or whatever. Like I know some people that live through that, and that can have a negative impact in a lot of ways. But I think having that ability to adapt to your surroundings really is what keeps you on edge. So like just keeping that in mind and like trying to remain mentally flexible with what makes you happy in life, and keeping that in mind is probably like my suggestion for staying happy in trying times.
Where I wanted to wrap up is I saw a lot of forms of success. And a lot of them were just lists categorizing your life into different pieces like power, economic, family, emotional, physical. They all just seemed like meaningless categorizations. But I saw one that just put it into two things. There are only two types of success. And I really found it a little inspiring. And I wanted to share that with you. And it's success in what you do versus success in who you are.
Okay.
So the success in what you do is your achievements, a lot of it. They can still be things that you worked towards, and not just like monetary or physical, but they can also be like achievements of like doing this half marathon and things like that. All of those are at the end of the day just blips of your entire life. And so the harder thing to attain, but the more permanent type of success is the success in who you are. And that is the success in loving what you want to do, the success in knowing that you're doing what you need to be doing to attain the things that you want to do, knowing that what you're doing is making you happy.
I feel like that's a really strong note to end on, too. Like, that's something great to keep in mind for people who maybe their goals right now, they have that little voice in the back of their head that's like, yeah, maybe not, Like, they want to have success in what they do, sure, but taking that step back, really looking in the mirror, and while you have the chance to change it, understanding that this job, I could have it, forever, but in an instant it's taken away. People can never take away my confidence in my body, my confidence in who I am and what I do. And I think
just
that's
find
beautiful.
It very simple and powerful. And I think it really like throws all the other motivators we saw before out the window, where it's like, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be power motivated. I don't have to be achievement motivated. As long as I am motivated by who I am and I find success and happiness in that, then you don't really need to be motivated or anything like that, other than just knowing that what you do is what makes you happy. A nice little sweet point to end on.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thanks.
You know a good motivator, Noah?
Views, clicks, likes.
Is this podcast. If you feel this is the end of like the church service where it's like if you feel like you need to thank you. Yeah, if you feel moved by this at all, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And I realize this is a little bit like sacrilegious. I'm comparing us to church. That's not what I meant. But you guys should subscribe.
But we have a podcast, so we know everything, just like God does.
Do the closer.
Now, once that, if we got someone making it through to the very end, my mom's birthday was yesterday, and I want to give her a shout out because she listens to my podcast. So if she made it here, I wanted to say happy birthday and I love you. I probably should have said it at the beginning, but whatever.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this Humorish podcast. If you liked it, check out our other content. You can email your topic suggestions to humorish.tm@gmail.com. You can also find us on YouTube or on Twitter at humorish_tm or use the hashtag NoahAsked. The podcast music was Watercolors by Vic Davie.